I am Patsy Walker, 36 years old, and until 9 minutes ago, I was the Vice President of Product Development at Palmer Tech Solutions. My father-in-law Gerald just ordered me to clear my desk while my rival Damon watched with a smirk. As security escorted me past my shocked team, a young lawyer burst into the hallway clutching a binder. What happened next in that boardroom changed everything. Sometimes the greatest comeback begins with your lowest moment. Before I dive into this wild story, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever faced workplace betrayal and want to see how I turned it all around. My journey with Palmer Tech Solutions began a decade ago. Fresh out of my MBA program with dreams bigger than my bank account, I joined as a junior product analyst. The company was mid-sized, then specializing in enterprise software solutions but had tremendous potential. Through countless late nights, innovative ideas, and genuine passion for our products, I climbed the corporate ladder, rung by difficult rung. By my 5th year, I led a small product team. By year 7, I was Director of Product Innovation, and 3 years ago, at 33, I became the youngest Vice President in company history. My department grew to 28 talented individuals who shared my vision and work ethic. Together, we developed PalmSync, the flagship software that tripled company revenue and put us on the map as serious industry players. My personal life became intertwined with Palmer Tech when I met Robert Palmer, the founder's son, at a company charity gala. Robert worked in a different division as Chief Marketing Officer. Our connection was instant and genuine. We dated for 18 months before getting married, which is when my professional relationship with Gerald Palmer Company founder and CEO became considerably more complicated. Gerald Palmer was old school in every sense. Tall and imposing with a full head of silver hair at 68, he built the company from nothing through sheer force of will and shrewd business tactics. His corner office featured hunting trophies and photos with politicians. Despite his occasional gruff demeanor, employees respected his business acumen and leadership. When Robert and I announced our engagement, I noticed the first subtle shift in Gerald's attitude toward me. During our wedding reception, after several whiskeys, he pulled me aside. "Patsy, you know I think you are a talented young woman," he said, his voice low. "But now people will say any success you have came because you married into the Palmer name. You will have to work twice as hard to prove them wrong." I assured him my work would continue to speak for itself. Yet from that day forward, every achievement came with an invisible asterisk. In meetings, Gerald would introduce me as Robert's wife, our VP of Product Development, rather than by my credentials alone. He questioned my decisions more intensively than those of other executives. At family dinners, he would steer conversations away from my professional accomplishments. Robert remained oblivious to these dynamics. "Dad's just old-fashioned," he would say. "He treats everyone that way." But I knew different. I saw how Gerald interacted with Damon Reed. Damon joined Palmer Tech 1 year after me, but advanced quickly through strategic alliances and political maneuvering rather than innovation. Tall, conventionally handsome, with an Ivy League pedigree and country club connections, he embodied everything Gerald valued. While my team created products, Damon's team in business development found ways to monetize them, often taking credit for overall success. Gerald increasingly invited Damon to private lunches and golf outings, grooming him visibly for greater responsibility. The tension came to a head when Palmer Tech prepared for international expansion. After years of domestic success, we were ready to enter Asian markets, which required significant capital investment and strategic planning. The board would vote on allocating $300 million for this expansion, an amount that would determine our company's future trajectory. I developed a proposal emphasizing product localization, cultural adaptation, and strategic partnerships with regional tech firms. My plan required higher initial investment, but projected stronger long-term market penetration and revenue growth. Damon's competing proposal focused on acquiring smaller local companies and rebranding their products under the Palmer name, a quicker but potentially riskier approach. 3 weeks before the board vote, warning signs began appearing. My meeting with potential Japanese partners was mysteriously rescheduled. Access to certain financial projections became limited. Gerald started avoiding my emails, communicating through his assistant Beverly instead. In the executive dining room, conversations would halt when I approached. Nancy, my loyal assistant for 5 years, started hearing whispers. The organizational chart for next quarter is being revised, she told me quietly one afternoon. And Damon has been meeting with HR and legal almost daily. I brought my concerns to Robert over dinner at home. He dismissed them while serving pasta in our kitchen. You're being paranoid, honey. Dad respects you. He told me last week how impressed he was with the new product roadmap. Then why am I being shut out of expansion planning meetings, I asked. And why did IT need to audit my department's server access yesterday? Robert sighed, setting down his wine glass. Look, everyone's stressed about the expansion. It's a huge investment. Try not to take the corporate politics personally. But it was personal, and the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. The weekend before the board meeting, I worked from home, refining my presentation and adding the latest market research data. I sent emails to my team with final preparation instructions for Monday. Everything was ready for what I thought would be the most important presentation of my career. I had no idea what Monday morning would actually bring. Monday arrived with unusual September warmth in Boston. I woke at 5:30 earlier than necessary with a knot of anticipation in my stomach. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock that afternoon. I selected my power outfit, a tailored navy suit with subtle pinstripes, and arrived at the office by 7:15, determined to review my presentation one final time. The security guard Harold greeted me with his usual friendly nod as I badged into the building, but his smile seemed strained. The early morning office had a strange electricity and unusual tension for that hour. As I walked through the product development floor toward my corner office, I noticed several of my team members already at their desks, which was highly unusual. Trevor, my senior product manager, quickly minimized something on his screen when he saw me. Nancy wasn't at her desk outside my office, another oddity. My phone buzzed with a text as I unlocked my office door. Something's happening. Gerald called emergency exec meeting at 6:30 without you. Damon looking smug. Be prepared. Coming to you now. Nancy. Before I could process this information, my office door swung open. Gerald entered, flanked by Damon and Fiona Matthews from Human Resources. Gerald's expression was stone cold. Damon's barely concealed a smirk, and Fiona looked uncomfortable, clutching a folder to her chest. Good morning, Patsy, Gerald, said his voice formal and distant. This won't take long. My heart pounded as Gerald moved to stand directly across from my desk, not taking a seat. Damon positioned himself near the door, arms crossed. You have 9 minutes to clear your desk, Gerald announced without preamble. Your employment with Palmer Tech Solutions is terminated effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of my desk, certain I had misheard. What are you talking about? My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Gerald straightened his tie, avoiding eye contact. The executive committee has determined that your department's performance no longer meets company standards. Project Horizon is 18% over budget with diminishing ROI projections. Additionally, your expansion proposal contains fundamental flaws that make it untenable. None of this made sense. Project Horizon was actually 2% under budget according to last week's reports, and my expansion proposal had been vetted by 3 separate departments. That's completely false, I said, finding my voice. I have the metrics and projections right here. We can review them together and clear up whatever misunderstanding. Gerald cut me off with a raised hand. The decision is final. The company will provide 4 weeks severance per your contract. Fiona has the paperwork. Fiona stepped forward reluctantly, placing the folder on my desk. I'll need your signature on these forms and your company laptop badge and phone. This is absurd, I said, looking from face to face. At least tell me the real reason. Is this about the expansion vote? Because your proposal is irrelevant now. Damon interjected, speaking for the first time. The board will be reviewing a revised strategy this afternoon. I turned to Gerald, searching for any sign of the man who had congratulated me on my department's achievements just months earlier. Gerald, we've worked together for 10 years. I'm married to your son. Don't I deserve an explanation, or at least a conversation about these alleged issues? For a moment, something flickered across his face, perhaps doubt or regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. This is business, Patsy, not personal. I've made my decision. He glanced at his Rolex. You now have 7 minutes remaining. I noticed Rodney from security hovering uncertainly in the doorway. His normally friendly face was a mask of discomfort. He had escorted excited new hires to orientation and helped elderly clients navigate the building, but never imagined he would be removing an executive from the premises. I'm sorry about this, Miss Walker, he said quietly. As the reality of the situation sank in, I began robotically gathering my personal belongings. Photos of Robert and me from our trip to Maine. The ceramic mug my team gave me after our successful product launch. The industry award for innovation that had once been my proudest achievement all went into a cardboard box Fiona produced. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see my team gathering, faces concerned and confused. Nancy stood among them, eyes red, rimmed, and angry. Trevor had his arm around Janet from UX Design, who appeared to be fighting tears. Damon made a show of measuring the dimensions of my office with exaggerated steps. I think my standing desk will fit perfectly in this corner, he said, not bothering to lower his voice, though the decor could use an upgrade. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a response, focusing instead on maintaining whatever dignity remained in this humiliating situation. With mechanical movements, I unplugged my personal phone charger, collected the framed degree from my wall, and placed my plant into the box. A life reduced to portable objects in less than 9 minutes. Time's up, Gerald announced, checking his watch again. Rodney will escort you out. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and picked up the box. You're making a serious mistake, Gerald. And I think you know it. His only response was to step aside, gesturing toward the door. The 20-step journey from my office to the elevator bank stretched into an endless gauntlet. Every face turned to watch as Rodney awkwardly led the way, occasionally glancing back with apologetic eyes. Damon and Gerald followed behind me like guards, ensuring a prisoner's transfer. My team had gathered in a loose semicircle. Their expressions ranged from shock to anger to confusion. Nancy stepped forward, tears streaming openly now. This is wrong, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Patsy built this department from nothing. Gerald's voice was sharp. Return to your desks immediately. A company meeting will be held at noon to discuss departmental changes. Nobody moved. Trevor, tall and usually reserved, stepped beside Nancy. We deserve to know what's happening. Damon moved forward. What's happening is a necessary reorganization to align with company priorities, unless anyone else wants their employment status reviewed today. The threat hung in the air, but still my team stood firm. Janet, from UX Design, petite and normally soft-spoken, broke the silence. We're going with her, she announced, grabbing her purse from her desk. One by one, others collected their belongings. Not everyone, but at least 15 of my 28 team members moved to follow me. This is insubordination, Gerald sputtered, his face reddening. I turned to my team, overwhelmed by their loyalty, but concerned for their livelihoods. No. Stay. Don't risk your jobs. I'll be fine. The project presentation is this afternoon, Trevor said pointedly. Good luck explaining the technical specifications without any of us. Gerald's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, commotion erupted from the direction of the executive suite. A young man in a slightly too large suit came rushing down the hallway, clutching a leather binder and looking panicked. I recognized him as Bradley Newman, a junior attorney who had joined the legal department just 6 months ago. Mr. Palmer, he called out breathlessly. Sir, there's an urgent matter with the board documents for the funding vote. Gerald turned impatiently. Handle it yourself, Newman. I'm in the middle of something. Bradley's eyes darted nervously between Gerald, Damon, and me. Sir, the General Counsel sent me. The signature pages for the regulatory compliance section are missing, and the board is asking questions about the legal liability disclosures in the expansion proposal. Damon stepped forward quickly. I reviewed those documents myself yesterday. Everything was in order. Bradley swallowed visibly. Mr. Whitman says otherwise, sir. He needs immediate clarification on the foreign partnership structure before the vote can proceed. Gerald checked his watch with obvious irritation. Fine, we'll deal with this now. He turned to Rodney. Escort Miss Walker from the building immediately. As they turned to leave, Bradley fumbled with the binder and several papers spilled onto the floor directly in front of me. As Rodney bent to help collect them, I clearly saw a page titled Regulatory Compliance Risk Assessment with red flags highlighted throughout the document. A section marked Potential Liability Issues Singapore, divided by Malaysia Operations, caught my eye with a handwritten note in the margin DR directed removal from board packet. Before Rodney could gather everything, I quickly snapped a photo with my personal phone. The image captured just as Bradley snatched the paper away, his eyes meeting mine for a brief significant moment. Give me that, Damon said, grabbing the paper from Bradley's hand and quickly scanning it. His expression darkened momentarily before he forced a smile. This is just a preliminary draft with errors. The correct version is already in the board packet. Bradley looked confused, but Mr. Whitman said, I'll speak with Kenneth myself. Gerald interrupted. Newman returned to legal and tell Whitman we're on our way. He turned to Damon. Let's go sort this out before the meeting. As they hurried away, I stood frozen, processing what I had just seen. Kenneth Whitman had been general counsel at Palmer Tech for 20 years, with an impeccable reputation for ethics and thoroughness. If he was raising concerns about the expansion proposal, something significant was wrong. Rodney cleared his throat uncomfortably. Miss Walker, I need to escort you out now. I nodded mechanically, my mind racing. As we walked toward the elevator, followed by my loyal team members, I discreetly checked the photo I had taken. Though partially blurred, I could make out enough to confirm my suspicions. Damon's proposal contained serious legal issues that had been deliberately concealed from the board. The elevator doors opened and we descended in silence. In the lobby, I turned to my team. Thank you for your support, but please go back upstairs. Don't jeopardize your positions. Nancy shook her head firmly. We're not abandoning you or the projects we believe in. They can't fire the entire department. Actually, they can, I said, the reality of our situation settling in. But I appreciate your loyalty more than you know. As we exited into the bright September morning, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. My career at Palmer Tech was over. My relationship with my father-in-law was irreparably damaged. My husband was caught in the middle, and somewhere upstairs a board meeting was about to approve an expansion plan with serious legal flaws. I had two choices: walk away and let Gerald and Damon face the consequences of their actions, or find a way to protect the company I had helped build despite their betrayal. Standing in the parking lot, clutching my box of office mementos, I looked at the loyal faces of my team members and made my decision. Does anyone have Kenneth Whitman's personal phone number? The company parking garage provided unexpected sanctuary as my impromptu war council assembled behind a row of concrete pillars. Trevor pulled his Tesla alongside my Audi, creating a visual barrier from security cameras. Nancy immediately took charge, setting my box of belongings in my trunk and pulling out her tablet. First things first, she said, with the efficiency that had made her invaluable for years. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. I showed the group the blurry photo I'd managed to capture. Trevor, with his technical background, quickly enhanced the image using an app on his phone. Regulatory compliance issues in Singapore and Malaysia, he read aloud, squinting at the screen. Something about shell company structures and... Is that saying potential FCPA violations? Janet gasped. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That's serious federal territory. Bradley's arrival interrupted our analysis. The junior lawyer had slipped away from the building and jogged across the parking garage, tie askew and forehead beaded with sweat. "I can't stay long," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "They'll notice I'm gone." "Why are you helping us?" I asked directly. Bradley straightened his posture. "Because what they're doing isn't right. I was hired to uphold legal standards, not help cover them up." He lowered his voice. "Mr. Whitman has been raising red flags about Damon's expansion structure for weeks, but Damon kept assuring everyone the issues were resolved. This morning, Mr. Whitman discovered entire sections of the compliance report were altered before being presented to the board. So Gerald and Damon are deliberately misleading the board about potential legal issues," I said, pieces falling into place, "and they needed me gone because your proposal didn't have these problems," Bradley confirmed, "and because you would have recognized the issues immediately during the presentation." Nancy was already typing furiously on her tablet. "The board meeting starts at 2 o'clock. They'll vote on the expansion funding by 3:30 according to the agenda. We have about 4 hours. Trevor leaned against his car, arms crossed. "What exactly are we planning here? A whistleblower email to the board? Because once that bell is rung, none of us will have jobs to return to, regardless of how this plays out." He had a valid point. Simple whistleblowing might expose the truth, but it would destroy careers, including those of my loyal team members. We needed a more strategic approach. "I need to speak with Kenneth Whitman directly," I decided. "And I need more concrete evidence than one blurry photo." Bradley hesitated before reaching into his messenger bag. "I made copies of the original compliance report and the altered version. Mr. Whitman doesn't know I have these." He handed me a folder. "The board meeting is in the main conference room on 12. Security has been instructed not to let you in the building." Nancy smiled for the first time that morning. "Security might have changed your access code, but they haven't deactivated mine yet." She held up her badge. "And I have the service elevator keycard." As our impromptu meeting continued, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Robert was calling for the 3rd time. I couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. "I need to take this," I told the group, stepping away for privacy. "Patsy, what the hell is happening?" Robert's voice was a mixture of confusion and concern. "Dad just called saying you've been terminated for performance issues. That can't be right." I took a deep breath. "Your father fired me this morning with no warning and no valid explanation. He had security escort me from the building, while Damon Reed smirked and measured my office." "There must be some mistake," Robert insisted. "Dad wouldn't do that without serious cause. He said the product division is hemorrhaging money, and your expansion plan was fundamentally flawed." The defense of his father stung, even if expected. "Robert, those claims are completely fabricated. My division is under budget, and our metrics are strong. This is about Damon wanting control of the expansion and your father enabling him. Ethics be damned." "That's a serious accusation," Robert said, his voice cooling. "Dad has run this company successfully for 30 years. He wouldn't risk everything on some personal vendetta." "I have evidence that Damon's proposal contains serious legal issues they're hiding from the board," I countered. "Your father is about to lead the company into potential regulatory violations that could threaten everything he's built." Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice tight. "What are you planning to do?" It was the pivotal question. The answer would potentially reshape our marriage as well as my career. "I'm going to protect the company, even from your father's poor judgment." Another pause. "I don't know what to say, Patsy. I'm caught in the middle here." "No, Robert, you're not in the middle. You're choosing sides by default. The question is whether you're choosing what's right or what's convenient." I ended the call before he could respond, turning back to my team with renewed determination. The personal fallout would have to wait. We had a company to save, and less than 4 hours to do it. "Nancy, call Amelia Johnston," I instructed, referring to an attorney friend who specialized in corporate law. "We need independent verification of these compliance issues." "Trevor, contact our partners in Singapore, who were cut out of Damon's proposal. See what they've been told." "Janet, I need you to prepare simplified visuals explaining the legal problems for non-technical board members." As my team dispersed to their tasks, I opened my trunk again, retrieving an emergency change of clothes I kept for unexpected overnight work trips. The tailored black dress and blazer were wrinkled but would have to do. The nearby coffee shop bathroom became my impromptu changing room. Looking at my reflection as I applied fresh lipstick, I confronted the reality of what I was about to do. Best case scenario, I would save the company from a disastrous mistake, but likely end my marriage in the process. Worst case, I would fail publicly and potentially face legal consequences for interfering after termination. The stakes were astronomical, but the alternative, walking away while knowing what I knew, wasn't really an option at all. By 1:30, our counteroffensive was ready. Amelia had confirmed the legal issues were legitimate and serious. Our Singapore partners revealed they'd been told I was the one who excluded them from the expansion. Janet had prepared clear, compelling visuals highlighting the problems. The board members start arriving through the executive entrance at 1:45, Nancy informed me, checking her tablet. Gerald and Damon are already in pre-meeting discussions with a few key members. I gathered my small strike team. Nancy, Trevor, and Bradley. You three come with me. Everyone else stay reachable by phone but return to your regular routines. Maintain plausible deniability. As we approached the Palmer Tech building for the second time that day, my heart pounded with adrenaline. Everything hinged on perfect timing and the courage to face down the man who had built this company, married his son, and then betrayed our professional relationship for reasons I still didn't fully understand. Ready? Nancy asked, holding her access card near the service entrance reader. I nodded, clutching the folder of evidence against my chest. Let's go save Palmer Tech from itself. The service elevator hummed quietly as we ascended to the 12th floor. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain the others could hear it. Nancy stood beside me, her tablet ready with the evidence we'd compiled. Trevor checked his watch repeatedly, while Bradley straightened his tie with nervous fingers. 2 minutes until the meeting officially starts, Trevor whispered. Gerald always begins precisely on time. The elevator doors opened to a narrow maintenance hallway. Nancy led us through a series of turns until we reached an unmarked door. This connects to the executive restroom anteroom, she explained, swiping her keycard. From there, we can access the hallway outside the main boardroom. We moved silently through the plush anteroom, hearing muffled voices growing louder as we approached the boardroom. Pressing against the wall beside the partially open door, I could hear Gerald's distinctive voice. Before we vote on the expansion funding, Damon Reed will present the finalized proposal. As you know, we've had to make some recent organizational changes to ensure this critical initiative has proper leadership. Peering through the crack, I saw the boardroom setup. 12 board members seated around the massive mahogany table. Gerald standing at the head, commanding the room with practiced authority. Damon beside him, sleek presentation materials arranged perfectly before him. Kenneth Whitman, the general counsel, sat stiffly near the far end, his expression troubled as he reviewed documents. As outlined in your packets, Damon began smoothly. The acquisition-based approach offers the most efficient entry into Asian markets. By purchasing existing companies with established infrastructure, we bypass costly regulatory hurdles and accelerate our timeline by approximately 18 months. I recognize the deliberate mischaracterization. What he described as bypassing regulatory hurdles was precisely what created the legal liability issues. Mr. Reed, Kenneth Whitman interrupted. I'm still concerned about pages 37 through 42 of the compliance section. The structure described for the Singapore operations appears inconsistent with local regulatory requirements. Damon's smile remained fixed. Those concerns were addressed in the revised section I provided this morning. The adjustments fully satisfy all compliance requirements. Kenneth frowned. I received no such revision. I had it delivered to your office personally, Damon insisted. Perhaps your assistant misplaced it. Regardless, I can assure the board that all regulatory issues have been resolved. It was the opening I needed. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door fully open and walked directly into the boardroom, followed by my small team. The reaction was immediate. Gerald's face flushed crimson. Damon froze mid-gesture. Board members turned in their chairs, expressions ranging from confusion to shock. "Miss Walker, you are no longer employed here," Gerald recovered quickly, his voice cold. "Security will be called immediately." I moved confidently to the center of the room, placing my materials on the table. "Board members, I apologize for this unusual entrance, but I believe you're about to vote on a proposal containing deliberately concealed legal and ethical issues that could expose Palmer Tech to significant liability." Victoria Winters, the longest-serving board member besides Gerald, spoke first. "Mr. Palmer, what is the meaning of this interruption?" Before Gerald could answer, I continued. "This morning I was terminated without warning or valid cause. The timing just hours before this vote was not coincidental. I have evidence that Mr. Reed's expansion proposal contains serious Foreign Corrupt Practices Act concerns that have been hidden from this board." "This is absurd," Damon sputtered. "She's making desperate accusations because her own proposal was rejected." Kenneth Whitman stood, his expression grave. "Actually, I'd like to hear what Miss Walker has to say. I've had concerns about the compliance aspects of this proposal that have not been adequately addressed." Gerald moved to intervene. "Kenneth, we discussed this. The revised documents—" "Which I never received," Kenneth interrupted firmly. I nodded to Nancy, who distributed copies of our findings to each board member. "What you're looking at is a comparison between the original compliance review conducted by the legal department and the version presented in your board packets. Sections dealing with regulatory violations have been removed or altered." The room fell silent as board members reviewed the documents. Trevor stepped forward, presenting the digital evidence on his tablet. "The structure Mr. Reed proposes for entering the Singapore and Malaysian markets involves shell companies that violate local transparency laws. Additionally, the proposed consulting payments to unnamed regional facilitators raise serious FCPA red flags." Damon's composure began to crack. "These are preliminary drafts that were never meant for board review. The final structure addresses all these concerns." "Then why were the concerns deliberately removed from the board materials rather than shown as resolved?" I challenged. "And why terminate the executive most familiar with these regulatory issues hours before this vote?" Victoria Winters removed her reading glasses, fixing Gerald with a stern look. "Gerald, is this accurate? Was information withheld from the board?" Gerald's authoritative presence diminished visibly as board members turned to him with questioning expressions. Certain preliminary concerns were omitted to avoid confusion. Damon assured me all issues had been resolved. Kenneth Whitman stood again. "As general counsel, I was not informed of any resolutions. In fact, my requests for additional compliance review were repeatedly denied over the past 2 weeks." "This is a deliberate attempt to sabotage the company's expansion," Damon said desperately. "Walker is bitter about her termination and is using outdated information to mislead the board." I remained calm, looking directly at Victoria and the other board members. "I have no desire to harm Palmer Tech. I've dedicated 10 years to this company and believe in its mission and potential. That's why I couldn't remain silent when I saw it being led toward legal and financial jeopardy." Victoria turned to Kenneth. "Mr. Whitman, in your professional opinion, does Mr. Reed's proposal, as currently structured, present significant legal risk to the company?" Kenneth straightened his ethical foundation, clearly reasserting itself now that the issues were in the open. "Yes, Miss Winters, it does. The structure as presented would almost certainly trigger regulatory investigations in multiple jurisdictions and potentially violate U.S. anti-corruption laws." The boardroom erupted in concerned murmurs. Gerald attempted to regain control. "This meeting is being hijacked by an emotional former employee. I move that we remove Miss Walker and continue our discussion privately." Victoria shook her head. "I believe this information is directly relevant to the vote we were about to take, Gerald. In fact, I move that we temporarily suspend consideration of the current proposal, pending a full legal review." "I second that motion," said Harold Blackstone, another senior board member. Gerald's face darkened as he realized he was losing control of the situation. "This is highly irregular. Patsy has no standing to address this board. Perhaps not technically, Victoria replied, but the information she's presented cannot be ignored. Kenneth, how quickly can your team conduct a thorough review of both expansion proposals with full compliance assessment? Kenneth considered for a moment. With adequate resources, 3 to 4 days. Victoria nodded decisively. Then I propose we reconvene next Monday after a complete legal review of both approaches. All in favor. Hands raised around the table, creating a clear majority. Gerald's authority, seemingly absolute just an hour earlier, crumbled before my eyes. Damon leaned toward Gerald, whispering urgently, but Gerald silenced him with a sharp gesture. His eyes met mine across the boardroom, a complex mixture of anger, surprise, and something else, perhaps reluctant respect. Very well, he said finally. We'll reconvene Monday at 2 o'clock with full legal assessment of all options. He looked pointedly at me. This doesn't change your employment status, Patsy. You're still terminated. I nodded acknowledgement, maintaining my professional demeanor despite the internal triumph I felt. I understand. I came here today as someone who cares about this company's future, not to contest my termination. As the board members gathered their materials and began filing out, several nodded to me respectfully. Kenneth Whitman approached with an extended hand. Thank you for your courage, Miss Walker. Legal ethics sometimes require uncomfortable stands. Victoria Winters paused beside me. That took integrity, Patsy. We should discuss this situation further, perhaps tomorrow morning in my office. I thanked her, feeling a surreal sense of victory amid professional chaos. As the boardroom emptied, only Gerald, Damon, and my small team remained, an awkward tableau of corporate drama. Gerald broke the silence. I underestimated your resolve, Patsy. A significant miscalculation on my part. Before I could respond, the boardroom door opened again. Robert stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the scene. I heard there was quite a meeting, he said quietly. Looks like I missed the fireworks. The real confrontation, I realized, was just beginning. The tension in the emptied boardroom was thick enough to touch. Robert stood just inside the doorway, his gaze moving from his father to Damon to me. No one seemed eager to break the uncomfortable silence. Nancy Trevor Bradley. Thank you for your support, I said quietly. Could you give us a few minutes? They nodded and filed out, Nancy squeezing my arm supportively as she passed. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Gerald was the first to speak. Robert, your wife has just undermined a $300 million expansion plan and publicly challenged my leadership before the board. Robert's expression remained measured. So, I've heard. I've also heard there were significant legal issues with the proposal that were deliberately hidden from the board. Is that true, Dad? Gerald's jaw tightened. Business involves complicated decisions. Sometimes information must be strategically presented. That's not a denial, Robert noted. He turned to Damon. And were you aware of these compliance problems? Damon adjusted his tie nervously. The issues were overstated. Every international expansion involves regulatory gray areas. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violations aren't gray areas, I interjected. They're federal crimes with penalties, including imprisonment. Robert nodded, slowly absorbing this information. So my wife was fired because she would have identified these problems during the board presentation. She was fired for performance reasons, Gerald insisted, but the conviction in his voice had waned. That's demonstrably false, I said. My division exceeded targets for 6 consecutive quarters. The real reason was to remove the primary obstacle to a flawed expansion plan. Robert turned to his father, disappointment evident in his expression. Dad, I've always respected your business acumen. But if what Patsy's saying is true, this crosses a line. You don't understand the pressures of running a company this size, Gerald responded, his voice suddenly tired. Damon's approach offered faster growth and higher short-term returns. The board and shareholders demand results. Not at the expense of legal compliance, Robert countered. You taught me that when I was 12. The boardroom door opened again as Kenneth Whitman returned, accompanied by Harriet Daniels, the company's chief financial officer. They carried stacks of documents and wore serious expressions. "Gerald, we need to discuss some additional concerns," Kenneth said. "In light of today's revelations, Harriet and I conducted a preliminary review of the financial projections in Damon's proposal." Harriet adjusted her glasses. "The revenue forecasts appear to have been systematically inflated while implementation costs were understated. When corrected, the ROI falls significantly below the figures presented to the board." Gerald sank into a chair, the weight of mounting problems visibly affecting him. "How bad?" "Bad enough to constitute potential securities fraud had we moved forward with investor disclosures based on these numbers," Kenneth said bluntly. Damon paled. "I can explain the methodology." "Save it for the full audit team," Harriet interrupted. "The board has authorized a comprehensive review of all documents related to the expansion proposals." Kenneth turned to me. "Miss Walker, the board has requested your original expansion proposal be included in the review. Would you be willing to provide all supporting documentation?" Before I could answer, Victoria Winters returned, accompanied by 2 other board members. She surveyed the room with a practiced eye before speaking. "Gerald, the board has convened an emergency session and wishes to speak with you immediately." Her tone left no room for argument. As Gerald stood to follow her, she turned to me. "Miss Walker, the board would appreciate if you would remain available. We may have questions about your alternative expansion approach." Gerald paused at the doorway, looking back at me. For a moment, the corporate masks fell away, leaving just a father-in-law and daughter-in-law in the wreckage of a broken trust. "I didn't want it to come to this, Patsy," he said quietly. "Neither did I replied honestly. After they departed, Robert, Damon, and I remained in uncomfortable silence. Damon finally gathered his materials, avoiding eye contact. "This isn't over," he muttered as he headed for the door. "Actually, I think it is," Robert responded, his voice firm. "The board will have questions for you too, Damon. I suggest you prepare honest answers." When we were finally alone, Robert approached me slowly, as if navigating unfamiliar terrain. "You took an enormous risk today," he said. "I had no choice. What they were doing was wrong." He nodded. "I know. I should have listened this morning when you tried to tell me." He hesitated. "I'm sorry I doubted you." The simple apology unexpectedly brought tears to my eyes after the emotional roller coaster of the day. "Your father made it very clear this morning that our marriage was irrelevant to business decisions." Robert reached for my hand. "Well, it's relevant to me. I should have been there for you." Our reconciliation was interrupted as the boardroom filled again. Victoria led a procession of board members, followed by a subdued Gerald and a stone-faced Kenneth Whitman. Victoria took charge immediately. "Miss Walker, the board has reached some preliminary decisions pending the full compliance and financial review. Gerald will temporarily step back from direct oversight of the expansion initiative while the investigation proceeds." She paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. "We would like to request your assistance in this transition period." "My assistance," I echoed, uncertain of her meaning. "The board believes your original expansion proposal has significant merit and addresses many of the compliance concerns identified today. We'd like you to present a fully updated version at Monday's meeting." Gerald stared at the table, accepting this partial removal from power with surprising quietude. Victoria continued. "This is not a reinstatement of employment yet, but a consulting arrangement until the board can properly evaluate the situation. Your expertise with the Asian markets and understanding of the regulatory landscape is valuable to us." The unexpected turn of events left me momentarily speechless. After being unceremoniously fired that morning, I was now being asked to save the very initiative they had pushed me out over. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I have some conditions." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "First, my team remains intact. Anyone who supported me today must be protected from retaliation." Victoria nodded. "Reasonable." "Second, the board acknowledges publicly that my termination was not performance-related." Gerald shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. "And third, I continued a complete review of management practices and decision-making processes. What happened today suggests a significant governance problem that goes beyond one expansion proposal. The board members exchanged glances, recognizing the fundamental challenge to how the company had operated under Gerald's leadership. After a moment of silent communication, Victoria spoke again. Those terms are acceptable in principle, subject to specific implementation details. The board recognizes that today's events indicate potential systemic issues that require attention. She extended her hand. Do we have an agreement? I looked at Robert, who nodded encouragingly, then at Gerald, whose expression had shifted from anger to resignation. The company he built was changing before his eyes, partially due to his own actions and partially due to my refusal to walk away. I shook Victoria's hand firmly. We have an agreement. As the meeting concluded, board members filed out, many stopping to speak with me briefly. Gerald departed without further comment, the weight of the day evident in his posture. When only Robert and I remained, he pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm proud of you, he whispered, and a little terrified of you, if I'm being honest. For the first time that day I laughed. Good. A healthy marriage needs a little terrified respect. As we gathered our things to leave the boardroom where my corporate life had nearly ended and then surprisingly revived, I reflected on the extraordinary day's journey, from being fired to fighting back to reshaping the company's future, all in less than 8 hours. The path forward would be challenging. Rebuilding trust with Gerald, if possible at all, would take time. Restructuring the expansion plan properly would require intensive effort. Navigating the company politics after such a dramatic confrontation would be delicate work. But standing there with Robert's support, knowing my team had risked their careers to stand beside me, I felt a surge of confidence. The worst day of my professional life had transformed into an unexpected opportunity to create something better, stronger, and more ethical than what had existed before. Ready to go home? Robert asked. I shook my head, smiling. Not yet. I have a team to thank first. 6 months passed like a whirlwind. The day that began with my humiliating 9-minute termination ultimately transformed Palmer Tech in ways no one could have anticipated. The initial consulting arrangement quickly evolved into something more permanent. 3 weeks after the boardroom confrontation, the board offered me a newly created position, Chief Operating Officer, with direct oversight of international expansion and product development. The role placed me firmly in the company's leadership tier, with only Gerald as CEO above me in the organizational chart. Our relationship remained complicated. Those first few weeks, Gerald and I communicated primarily through formal emails and carefully worded memos. Board meetings featured polite but distant professional interactions. The personal breach seemed potentially irreparable. Robert found himself in the unenviable position of mediator between his wife and father, both at home and in the office. To his credit, he managed the situation with remarkable patience and emotional intelligence. He respects what you did, Robert told me one evening as we shared takeout in my new office still being decorated. He'll never admit it explicitly, but standing up to him that way, with evidence and professionalism rather than emotion, reminded him of himself at your age. I remained skeptical. Respect doesn't heal betrayal, Robert. No, he agreed, but time might. Dad built this company through sheer force of will. Seeing it nearly damaged by his own actions has shaken him. He's reevaluating a lot of things. The turning point in our relationship came unexpectedly during the launch preparation for our Singapore office. The revised expansion plan, combining elements of my original proposal with additional safeguards recommended by Kenneth's legal team, had been unanimously approved by the board. Implementation was proceeding smoothly under my direction, with Damon reassigned to a diminished role focusing on domestic operations. Late one evening, as I reviewed contractual details for our primary Asian manufacturing partner, Gerald appeared in my office doorway. He looked older somehow, the events of recent months etched into the lines of his face. "Do you have a moment, Patsy?" His voice lacked its usual commanding tone. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, setting aside the contracts. Gerald sat uncharacteristically hesitant. "The Singapore launch materials look excellent. The partnerships you've established are stronger than I anticipated. Thank you, I replied, unsure where the conversation was heading. He was silent for a moment, seemingly gathering his thoughts. I made a serious error in judgment. Several, actually. The admission clearly didn't come easily to him. Palmer Tech has been my life's work, and I nearly compromised its future because I couldn't see past my own preconceptions. I remained silent, allowing him the space to continue. Damon represented what I understood business leadership to be: decisive, aggressive, politically savvy. Your approach seemed too collaborative, too focused on long-term sustainability rather than immediate results. He sighed heavily. I was wrong. The simple admission hung in the air between us, not quite an apology, but as close as Gerald Palmer was likely to come. The company is evolving, Gerald, I said finally. The leadership styles that built it aren't necessarily the same ones that will carry it forward. He nodded slowly. The board has been discussing succession planning more actively since recent events. He met my eyes directly. Your name features prominently in those conversations. The implication was clear. My path to eventually becoming CEO had suddenly accelerated with Gerald's reluctant blessing. That's a conversation for another day, I replied. Right now we have an expansion to launch successfully. A ghost of his former confident smile appeared. Indeed we do. He stood to leave, then paused. Sunday dinner this weekend. Eleanor has been asking when you and Robert will visit. The simple domestic invitation represented more than it appeared, an olive branch extending beyond the professional realm into family healing. We'll be there, I promised. The reintegration with my team proved less complicated. The day after the board meeting, I gathered everyone in the product development area. Many had risked their positions to support me, while others had remained cautiously on the sidelines. Both choices were understandable given the circumstances. I won't pretend the past week has been normal. I began perched informally on a desk, rather than standing formally at the front. And I won't promise that everything will immediately return to how it was before. What I can promise is that your loyalty and professional integrity have been noted not just by me, but by the board. No one will face retaliation for the choices they made during this challenging time. Trevor, who had been among the first to stand with me, asked the question on everyone's mind. What happens to the department now? Are you coming back as VP? No, I explained I'll be serving in the new COO role, which means we need a new VP of product development. I smiled at their concerned expressions. And I'm happy to announce that the board has approved my recommendation of Trevor for the position with Janet as senior director. The spontaneous applause and congratulations momentarily lifted the lingering tension. As the team dispersed back to their work, Nancy approached me. For what it's worth, she said quietly, most of us would have followed you out the door permanently if necessary. This team believes in your leadership, not just your title. That vote of confidence meant more than any corporate promotion could. The expansion launched on schedule 3 months later. Our Singapore office opened with appropriate ceremonial fanfare, followed by strategic partnerships in Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea. The carefully structured legal framework Kenneth and I developed became a model for ethical international expansion, even featured as a case study at several business schools. Damon eventually left Palmer Tech for a position with a smaller competitor. His departure was handled with professional courtesy, the company taking the high road despite the circumstances that had brought his ethical lapses to light. Bradley, the young lawyer whose fumbled documents had revealed the critical evidence, received a promotion within the legal department and became one of Kenneth's most trusted associates. As for me, the journey from fired executive to company leadership brought profound personal growth alongside professional advancement. The experience transformed my understanding of corporate politics, ethical leadership, and my own resilience. The morning of my termination, standing in the parking lot with a box of office belongings, I had felt utterly powerless. The realization that my father-in-law could dismiss a decade of contribution in 9 minutes had shaken my sense of professional identity to its core. Yet that moment of absolute vulnerability became the catalyst for finding a deeper strength, one based not on title or organizational authority, but on commitment to principles and the courage to defend them. I learned that true leadership often happens in the spaces between formal power structures, that integrity sometimes requires risking everything, and that the relationships you build throughout your career may ultimately matter more than the positions you hold. Most importantly, I discovered that healing after betrayal doesn't require forgetting the pain, but rather integrating it into a more complete understanding of human complexity. Gerald's actions stemmed from flawed judgment rather than malice, from an outdated business philosophy rather than personal animosity. Recognizing this allowed me to move forward professionally without carrying debilitating resentment. My office door now remains literally and figuratively open. The traumatic experience of being suddenly excluded from the company I helped build has made me vigilant about creating inclusive decision processes and transparent communication channels at every level of the organization. The wall between my past office and Damon's has been removed, creating an open collaborative space where department leaders can work together rather than compete in isolation. It's a small architectural change with profound symbolic importance for the evolving company culture. Robert and I have emerged stronger as well, having weathered a crisis that could have fractured our marriage. The forced renegotiation of family and professional boundaries, though painful, ultimately created healthier dynamics on both fronts. Last week marked the 6-month anniversary of what company insiders now jokingly call the 9-minute termination that wasn't. My team surprised me with a small celebration, complete with a cake decorated with a miniature boardroom scene. As I looked around at their smiling faces, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from that moment in my office with the cardboard box to this moment of genuine community and shared purpose. Sometimes our greatest professional growth comes not from our successes, but from how we respond to our most painful setbacks. Being fired in 9 minutes forced me to decide what I truly stood for and what I was willing to fight for. The answer, it turned out, was bigger than my job title or even my own career. It was about integrity, ethical leadership, and creating a workplace where people could thrive through authentic contribution rather than political maneuvering. If you're facing your own moment of professional betrayal or unexpected setback, remember that the story doesn't end when you're escorted from the building. Sometimes it's just beginning. Your response in those crucial moments after disappointment will define your path forward more than the setback itself. Have you experienced a professional betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content about navigating workplace challenges with integrity. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes the moments that seem to be ending your story are actually beginning a better chapter.